He told me he loved me that morning. He said it while tying his tie in the mirror, his eyes meeting mine in the reflection for a fraction of a second before glancing away. I didn't know it would be the last true thing he'd ever say to me, or that the next 7 words out of his mouth would be a lie so perfectly constructed it would dismantle my entire life. Working late again, sweetheart. Big merger closing. Don't wait up. If you've ever had the ground vanish from under your feet with just a sentence, if you've ever looked at a person and seen a stranger wearing a familiar face, then you understand. This is a story for you. If you want to hear more stories like mine, stories of finding strength in the wreckage, subscribe to the channel and stay with me. You're not alone here. I stood at the front door, a chipped blue mug of coffee warming my hands, and watched his black Audi sedan glide down our cul-de-sac. The leaves were just starting to turn on the oak trees lining Pinehurst Court, edges burning with early October gold. 37 years of marriage, and I still catalogued his departures. The precise angle of his wrist on the steering wheel, the brief tap of the brake lights at the stop sign, the way he never looked back. Martin was a man of forward motion. I used to admire that. The house settled into its weekday silence. Our son, Jamie, was a freshman at college, 3 states away. The quiet he left behind was a physical presence, a hollow echo in the halls where his laughter used to bounce. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, and placed it in the dishwasher. My routine was a liturgy of small, careful actions, wiping the granite counters until they shone, plumping the throw pillows on the sectional, checking the calendar pinned to the fridge. Dentist, 3 p.m. Book club, 7 p.m. A life written in erasable ink. I was gathering laundry from the hamper in our walk-in closet when I saw it. The cufflink, a single platinum square with a subtle matte finish, winking at me from the deep pile of the charcoal carpet. It was one from a set I'd given him for our 15th anniversary. He'd been frantic looking for them last week before the Hamilton and Pierce Gala. "I can't find them anywhere, Rebecca. Did you move them?" His voice had an edge I'd chalked up distress. I knelt, picking it up. It was cold, and it wasn't alone. Beside it, barely visible, was a single, long strand of hair. Not my honey brown gone fully to a soft pepper and salt. This was a vibrant, preternatural shade of copper, the color of a new penny. It looked synthetic and utterly real all at once. My heart, that faithful, stupid organ, didn't race. It just sank, a slow, cold descent into a place I didn't know existed inside me. I didn't search. Not then. A good wife trusts. A good wife doesn't rifle through pockets or check phone bills. A good wife believes her husband when he says the $487 charge from La Belle Epoque on their shared visa was a business dinner for a client who appreciated fine wine. I had believed. I had been a very good wife. But holding that cufflink and that strand of hair, I stopped being good. I started being quiet and watchful. I put the cufflink on his dresser, right in the center. I coiled the hair into a tiny loop and sealed it inside a Ziploc bag from the kitchen, tucking it into the very back of my jewelry box, behind my mother's cameo. Evidence. The word felt melodramatic, but it was the only one that fit. That night, he came home at 9:47 p.m. He smelled of his usual aftershave and, faintly, of bleach and lemons, like a high-end hotel lobby. He kissed my cheek, his lips dry and quick. "Exhausting," he sighed, loosening his tie. "These lawyers are vampires. You wouldn't believe the clauses." He launched into a detailed, boring story about escrow accounts and liability waivers. It was flawless. It was the performance of his life. "How was your day?" he asked, finally, pulling a craft beer from the fridge. "Quiet," I said. "I found your cufflink, the platinum one. It was on the closet floor." A micro-expression flitted across his face, too fast to name, but it wasn't gratitude. It was calculation. "Ah, fantastic. I've been turning the place upside down. Where was it?" Just there, on the floor. I held his gaze. It must have fallen off. Must have, he agreed, taking a long swallow. Thanks, Beck. I cooked salmon with dill, his favorite. We ate at the kitchen island, the television news murmuring about market fluctuations. We talked about Jamie's latest phone call, about the gutters needing cleaning, about whether to get a new sofa. The ordinary script of an ordinary marriage. And all the while, a silent countdown ticked in my head. Liar, liar, liar. The proof, when it came, wasn't a thunderclap. It was a slow, creeping tide. It was Thursday. He'd left his laptop on the dining room table, something he never did. He was always scrupulous about taking it to his home office, citing security protocols. His password was our wedding date, August 10th. He'd never changed it. The arrogance of that, the sheer unguarded carelessness was my first real clue to the depth of his deception. He didn't think I'd look. He didn't think I could look. My hands were steady as I typed in 08101987. The desktop bloomed open, a galaxy of folders and files. I wasn't a hacker. I was just a woman who knew her husband's patterns. I went straight to the browser history. It was mostly cleared, but he'd forgotten the autofill data. I clicked on the address bar of a private browser window and a drop-down list appeared. One address typed repeatedly over the last 4 months, 2247 Briarwood Road, Unit 12B. It was an apartment complex in the newer part of town, the kind with a chic name like The Verandas or Ascend Lofts. A quick search confirmed it. The Hawthorne Residences, luxury rentals, month-to-month leases available. A cold, clear focus settled over me. This was my crime scene. I began to document. I used my phone to take pictures of the browser history, of the autofill. I opened his email. He was logged in. I didn't scroll through messages. That felt like drowning. Instead, I went to the deleted items folder. Empty, of course. But then I saw the drafts folder. It had one item saved from 2 weeks ago. The subject line was blank. The body read, "Meeting ran long. Can't make it tonight. Need to handle something with R. Will explain tomorrow. Miss you." It was addressed to a jumble of letters and numbers. klennox2247@mail.com. Miss you. I sat back, the leather of the dining chair cool against my arms. R. That was me. I was the something that needed handling, an obligation, a logistical problem. The rage that came then was clean and sharp, a scalpel. It didn't hurt. It cut away the numbness. I heard the garage door hum. I closed the laptop exactly as it was and was pouring a glass of water at the sink when he walked in. "You're up late?" he said, hanging his suit jacket neatly on the back of a chair. "Couldn't sleep. Rough day?" He ran a hand over his face, the picture of weary integrity. "The worst. The other side is being completely unreasonable. We might have to work through the weekend to get this across the finish line." "This weekend?" I kept my voice light, concerned. "But we're supposed to have dinner with the Garcias on Saturday." He waved a dismissive hand. I know. I'll try to wrap it up. But this deal, it's pivotal, Beck, for my partnership track. You understand?" I nodded slowly, taking a sip of water. "Of course I do. Your work comes first." The words, which I'd said 1,000 times before, tasted like ash. He came over, cupped my face. His thumbs stroked my cheekbones. "You're my rock. I don't know what I'd do without you." His eyes were the warm, dependable brown I'd fallen in love with at 25. They were lying to me. That was the first quote, the one that etched itself into my bones. "You're my rock. I don't know what I'd do without you." It wasn't a declaration of love. It was a user's manual. A rock is steady. A rock is silent. A rock bears weight without complaint. The next morning, I called in sick to the small art gallery where I worked part-time. Then I drove to 2247 Briarwood Road. The Hawthorne residences were exactly as I'd imagined, sleek sandstone-colored buildings with balconies adorned by identical potted evergreens. A shimmering pool in the center, empty now in the autumn chill. It spoke of transient success, of a life not yet fully rooted. Unit 12B would be on the second floor, facing the parking lot. I parked my sensible SUV between a sporty convertible and a pickup truck, feeling invisible. I didn't know what I was waiting for. Confirmation, maybe? The transformation of a digital ghost into flesh and blood. I didn't have to wait long. At 10:30 a.m., the door to 12B opened, and a woman stepped out. She was younger than me, maybe 35 to my 62. She was tall, willowy, dressed in expensive-looking athleisure wear, her coppery red hair piled in a messy, perfect bun. She carried a yoga mat. She walked with the easy, unhurried confidence of someone who owns her space and her time. She got into the convertible and drove off. I sat there, hands clamped on the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I just breathed. In, out. Her name, presumably, was Kay Lennox. She had a yoga mat. She lived in an apartment my husband paid for. She was the reason for the $487 dinners, for the hotel lobby scent, for the lost cufflink, for the lie that was now my life. The concrete proof was no longer a digital phantom. It had coppery hair and a Lululemon jacket. The specific data point was the address, 2247 Briarwood Road, Unit 12B, leased to K. Lennox Holdings as per the directory at the complex's entrance. A corporate shell. How clever. I drove to the library, not home. I needed neutral ground. In a quiet carrel, surrounded by the smell of old paper, I made my first plan. I wasn't ready for a lawyer yet. I needed to know the scope. I needed to know what I was fighting for or what I was walking away from. I started with our finances. Martin had always handled the big picture, the investments, the retirement accounts. I managed the household accounts, the groceries, the utilities. A partnership, he called it. Now I saw it for what it was, a silo. He kept me in my lane. Over the next week, I became an archaeologist of my own life. I logged into every shared account online. I photographed statements. I found the secret. It was a bank account at a different institution, one whose statements never came to our house. The login was saved on his laptop. The account was in his name only. And for the past 18 months, $4,500 had been transferred into it automatically from our joint savings on the 1st of every month. From there, it paid out $3,200 to Hawthorne Residential Management and scattered the rest on restaurants, boutique clothing stores, and a florist called Patel. The math was brutal. He had siphoned off over $81,000 of our shared money to fund his other life. $81,000. The number floated in front of my eyes. That was a kitchen renovation. That was Jamie's next year tuition. That was security. That was our future. He hadn't just stolen my trust, he'd stolen my safety. The second quote came that Saturday. He'd worked all day. I'd spent it at the library, printing, documenting, my heart a block of ice. He came home, genial and relaxed, and announced he was taking a shower. His phone, left on the coffee table, buzzed with an incoming text. The preview flashed on the screen.
Today was perfect. Can't wait for Tuesday. Still 7? I stared at it. Tuesday. I had a standing volunteer commitment at the animal shelter on Tuesdays. He knew that. He came out, towel around his waist, saw me looking at his phone, a flicker of panic, instantly masked. He scooped it up casually. "Work," he said with an apologetic grimace. "Never ends." "On a Saturday night?" I asked, my voice a study in mild curiosity. He shrugged, a beautiful, fluid gesture of helplessness. "Global markets, sweetheart. Someone's always awake." He leaned down, kissed the top of my head. "Don't worry your pretty head about it." Don't worry your pretty head about it. Quote number 2. Condescension dressed up as care. It was the sound of him patting me on the head and sending me back to my playpen. That was the moment, the small turn, the brief revenge. I looked up at him, my eyes wide, the picture of naive concern. It must be so stressful, I said softly. All those secrets to keep track of? You must be exhausted. He froze for a half second, his smile rigid. Then he chuckled, a dry, hollow sound. You have no idea. He headed for the bedroom. Oh, but I was starting to. I was building my idea, brick by brick, statement by statement. I needed an ally. I called my older sister Margot. She lived in Arizona, and her voice, crackling over the line, was a lifeline. She'd survived her own divorce a decade ago, emerging not broken, but fierce. I need a lawyer, Margot, the best, meanest divorce attorney you know, someone who eats finance guys for breakfast. She didn't gasp. She didn't ask if I was sure. She just said, "Give me 2 hours." She called back with a name, Simone Archer. She's a shark in a sheath dress. She got my friend Lydia 70% of her husband's business when he tried to hide assets. She's expensive, but she's worth it. I made the appointment for the following Thursday, telling Martin I was spending the day with a friend from the gallery, shopping for her daughter's wedding. He'd nodded absently, already scrolling through emails. The ease of his dismissal was its own kind of weapon. Simone Archer's office was downtown, all cool glass and steel, with breathtaking views of the river. Simone herself was in her 50s, with a sleek dark bob and eyes that missed nothing. She wore a crimson dress that meant business. "Tell me," she said after I sat down. No small talk. I liked her immediately. I laid it out. The cufflink, the hair, the laptop, the bank account, the apartment, the transfers. I showed her my photos, my spreadsheets, the Ziploc bag with the copper strand. I handed her a timeline I'd constructed. She examined it all in silence, her expression unreadable. When she looked up, she gave a small, approving nod. "You're very thorough, Rebecca. Most clients come to me with a feeling and a prayer. You've brought me a blueprint." "What do I do?" The question felt enormous and simple. "What do you want to do?" she countered. I hadn't let myself think in those terms. I'd been thinking in terms of survival, of documentation. Now I forced myself to look into the void of possibility. "I want out," I heard myself say. The words were quiet but absolute. "I want the house. It's been my home for 18 years. I want my fair share of everything, especially the retirement accounts he's been contributing to while draining our cash. I want him to know that I know. I don't want a messy public war, but I won't be cheated, not emotionally and not financially." Simone smiled. It wasn't a warm smile, it was the smile of a master sculptor looking at a solid block of marble. "Good, we can do that. Adultery is a factor here, but the financial deception is even more powerful. The secret account, the diversion of marital funds, that's fiscal misconduct. The court will not look kindly on it." We talked strategy for 2 hours. She advised me to stay in the house, to maintain the status quo. She told me not to confront him yet. We would gather every shred of evidence, file for divorce on grounds of adultery and constructive fraud, and hit him with a temporary restraining order freezing the assets and forcing him out of the house, all at once. It was called the nuclear option. It was designed to stun the opposition into submission. "He thinks you're a rock, Rebecca," Simone said, gathering my papers. "He's about to learn that rocks can landslide." I left her office with a retainer agreement and a feeling of terrifying clarity. I was no longer a victim of his story. I was the author of my own. The next Tuesday, I went to the animal shelter as usual. I petted anxious dogs and cleaned cages, my mind 1,000 miles away. At 6 p.m., I told the coordinator I had a headache and left. I didn't go home. I drove to a side street with a view of the Hawthorne's parking lot. At 7:55 p.m., Martin's Audi pulled in. He got out, carrying a bottle of wine in a paper bag. He took the stairs to the second floor, 2 at the time, a spring in his step I hadn't seen in years. He knocked on the door of 12B. It opened, and the woman with the coppery hair was silhouetted in the golden light. She leaned in, kissed him, pulled him inside. The door closed. I sat there until full dark, until the lights in 12B glowed warmly behind closed blinds. I thought about the $3,200 monthly rent, the $81,000, the years of my life spent building a fortress for us both, only to find he'd built a secret tunnel out of it. I drove home to our empty, spotless fortress. I went to Jamie's old room, sat on his bed, and called him.
"Hey, Mom." His voice was bright, loud with dorm room energy. "Hi, sweetie." I pressed my fingers to my eyes. I wanted to hear your voice. "You okay? You sound tired."
I am tired, I admitted. Things with your dad, they're complicated right now. A pause. Complicated how? We're having some problems, Jamie. Serious ones. I think we might separate. Saying it to my child made it real in a new, awful way. Oh, Mom. His voice softened, deepened. Is he? He's having an affair. The words were blunt stones. There was no kind way to say them. Jamie exhaled, a sharp, hurt sound. That bastard. I'm so sorry, Mom. Are you safe? Do you need me to come home? His immediate loyalty, his fury on my behalf, was a balm. No, I'm safe. I'm handling it. I have a good lawyer. I just needed you to know. I didn't want you to hear it from him or in some messy explosion later. I love you, Mom. God, you deserve so much better. Whatever you need, I'm here. After we hung up, I cried. Not for Martin, but for the family we'd pretended to be, for the son who had to bear this weight, for the history we'd now have to rewrite with a darker ink. The confrontation, when it came, was not of my choosing. He accelerated the timeline. It was a week later. The papers were being prepared. Simone was ready to file. I was a live wire of quiet tension, pretending to read a novel in the living room while he watched a football game. His phone rang. He glanced at it, stood up abruptly. "Work call," he muttered, and walked into his study, closing the door. But the walls were not as thick as he thought, or his voice was louder. I couldn't make out words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was soft, placating, intimate. It was the tone he used to use with me a lifetime ago. Then I heard my name. "Rebecca? No, she's fine. She doesn't suspect a thing. It's under control." The ice in my veins turned to fire. I stood up, walked to the study door, and pushed it open without knocking. He was standing by the window, his back to me, the phone to his ear. "Look, I have to go. I'll see you tomorrow, I promise." He turned, saw me. His face went slack with shock. He fumbled the phone. "I have to call you back." He hung up. The room was deafeningly quiet. "Who doesn't suspect a thing, Martin?" My voice was calm, flat. "Rebecca, that was a client, a difficult one. She's paranoid about confidentiality." I didn't move. "Her name is Kay Lennox. She lives at 2247 Briarwood Road, Unit 12B. You pay $3,200 a month for her apartment from a secret account you've been funding with our money for 18 months. You've spent over $80,000 on her. You see her on Tuesdays when I'm at the shelter. You smell like her hotel lobby soap when you come home. You lost a cufflink in her presence, and she left a strand of her cheap dye job hair in my closet." Every word was a hammer blow. His face cycled through pale, to red, to ashen. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The master of words, speechless. You went through my things?" he finally stammered, his indignation a pathetic last stand. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "That's your takeaway? You bankrupt our trust? You rob our family? You lie to my face for years? And you're upset about your privacy?" He took a step toward me, his hands out, pleading. "Beck, it's not what you think. It's not serious. She means nothing." Quote number 3. "She means nothing." I let the words hang in the air, ugly and cheap. "You set fire to our life for nothing? That's so much worse than if she'd meant something. You're not a tragic lover. You're just a cliché with a good credit score." His composure shattered. "What do you want from me? An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. It was a mistake. I was under pressure. You were distant. The house was so quiet after Jamie left." "Don't," I cut him off, my voice like steel. "Don't you dare blame me, or the quiet, or your job. You made choices.
Every single Tuesday, every transfer, every lie was a choice. You chose this. He slumped into his desk chair, running his hands through his hair. What are you going to do? I've already done it. I walked to the doorway. My lawyer, Simone Archer, will be filing for divorce tomorrow morning on grounds of adultery and fraudulent dissipation of marital assets. You'll be served at your office. There will be a temporary order granting me exclusive use of the house and freezing all accounts. You need to find somewhere else to sleep tonight. His head jerked up. You're kicking me out? This is my house, too. Not anymore. Not after you used it as a bank to fund your other life. The paperwork will show you have ample resources from your secret slush fund to get a hotel. Maybe she has a couch. The sheer brutal practicality of my plan seemed to finally pierce his reality. This wasn't a tearful scene. This was an eviction. You can't do this, he whispered, but it was a statement of awe, not defiance. Watch me. He left an hour later, throwing clothes into a suitcase with a stunned, mechanical energy. He stood in the foyer, a man who'd orchestrated a complex double life, but had no contingency plan for being caught. I never wanted to hurt you, he said, his final, feeble line. I looked at him, this handsome, hollow man I'd shared a bed with for 37 years. The love was gone, scraped out, leaving only a clean, empty space. I believe you, I said, and that's the tragedy. You didn't want to, but you did. You just didn't care enough to stop. He flinched. It was the only real reaction I'd gotten from him in years. Then he walked out, the heavy door clicking shut behind him with a finality that echoed through the silent house. The silence this time was different. It wasn't empty, it was full of potential. It was mine. The legal process was a grinding, meticulous engine. Simone was, as promised, a shark. Martin hired an aggressive lawyer, and for a few weeks he fought. He claimed the secret account was for a private investment, that Kay Lennox was a business consultant, but the paper trail was relentless. The apartment lease, the transfers, the timing, it was a map of his deceit, and Simone followed it mercilessly. The temporary orders held. He was barred from the house. His assets were frozen. He was forced to disclose everything. In a desperate move, he had the woman, whose full name was Kendra Lennox, sign an affidavit denying a romantic relationship. It was laughably transparent and only made him look more foolish. The fight left him after the discovery hearing, where Simone laid out our evidence. I sat calmly, watching his lawyer's shoulders slump. We settled. I got the house, free and clear. I got 60% of the total marital assets, a punitive adjustment for his financial misconduct. I got a generous portion of his 401k and stock options. I got spousal support for 5 years to give me time to rebuild my career full-time. He got the secret account, now nearly depleted, his car, and his freedom. The divorce was finalized on a bright, cold day in March. I didn't see him at the courthouse. Simone handled the final signing. It was done. The first thing I did was change the locks. Then I called a contractor and had the built-in shelves in Martin's study ripped out. I turned it into a painting studio with north-facing light. I bought canvases and oils, materials I hadn't touched since before Jamie was born. The first thing I painted was abstract, a swirl of chipped blue, cold platinum, and violent coppery red, all collapsing into a deep, quiet black, from which a single thin streak of gold emerged. I reconnected with friends. I worked more hours at the gallery, and my boss, seeing a new fierceness in me, put me in charge of sourcing local artists. I found I had an eye for it. Jamie came home for the summer. The house felt right again, filled with his music and his mess. We talked about it all, late into the nights. He was angry, but he was healing. So was I. One afternoon, I was cleaning out the attic, and I found my old portfolio from art school. Drawings, sketches, ambitious plans for installations that would interrogate domestic space. I'd been good. I'd had something to say. Then I met Martin, and my art had slowly been folded away, like nice linen saved for a special occasion that never came. I brought the portfolio downstairs. I didn't cry over it. I propped one of the larger drawings, an intricate geometric study of a honeycomb, on the mantel. It was a part of me I was reclaiming. I heard through the grapevine that Kendra Lennox had moved away shortly after the settlement. The Hawthorne residences had apparently lost their appeal. Martin moved into a sterile, high-rise apartment downtown. I saw him once from a distance, getting coffee. He looked smaller, older, just a man in a suit. The garden I'd always tended with a sense of duty became a passion. I planted heirloom roses, unruly and fragrant, not the perfect, scentless hybrid teas he'd preferred. I let the clematis grow wild over the arbor. I planted a dogwood tree in the center of the yard, a burst of white blooms in the spring. A year to the day after he left, I hosted a party. Not a sad, look-at-me-now party, but a real one. My friends from the gallery, my book club, Margot, who flew in, Jamie and his new girlfriend. We grilled in the backyard, under the twinkling lights I'd strung in the dogwood. The air was warm, filled with laughter and the smell of rosemary and charcoal. I stood by the back door, my own chipped blue mug in my hand, watching the scene. My son danced with his girlfriend by the fire pit. My sister told a raucous story, hands flying. My friend Anna from the shelter refilled wine glasses. Martin had told me I was his rock, a foundation, something solid, passive, and heavy to build upon. But rocks are also what remain after the river has swept everything else away. They are what you find at the core of the earth. They can be sculpted. They can be the foundation of something entirely new, something you build for yourself. I am no longer his rock. I am the gardener. I am the painter. I am the mother, the friend, the gallery manager. I am the woman who learned to read a spreadsheet and a heart with equal clarity. I am the silence that is no longer empty, but humming with my own thoughts. If you are in the quiet house, holding the piece of evidence that breaks your heart, know this: your peace is not the absence of noise. It is the presence of your own unedited voice. It is the sound of you choosing yourself. It took 37 years to become a stranger in my own life. It took one strand of copper hair to begin the journey back. I spent decades waiting to be seen. Now I see myself, and the view is breathtaking. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever found strength you didn't know you had, share it. Leave a comment below. Tell me about your turn, your moment of clarity. Your story matters. Don't keep it locked away. And if you want to hear more journeys like mine, stories of finding the light after the long dark, subscribe to the channel. Stay with me. There's more strength to share.